As you may know, the Holocaust was the genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of non-Jew civilians. It is a very special honor to hear my great-aunt's story firsthand. And now I'll turn the mic over to Robin Hutchings. Ooh.
Thank you, Samantha. Good evening, everyone. My name is Robin Hutchings, as she just said, and I am the Treasurer and Engagement Officer for Grand Valley's Hillel. It is with great honor that myself and Hillel present to you Magda Brown and her incredible story. We have all been through struggles in our lives. However, some have experienced a deeper loss and a deeper pain than others. The Holocaust in World War II was such a loss for the entire world, leaving most countries involved with almost a complete abolition of a generation. By being here today, each and every one of you in this room are saying never again. Never again will we stand by and allow segregation, evacuation, and elimination of our friends and neighbors. Never again will we allow hate to have such a detrimental force in the lives of over 11 million people. And never again will we be quiet when we see people being blatantly discriminated against. Ms. Magda Brown strives to leave her audience with 3 important lessons. Protect your freedom, think before you hate, and stand up to the deniers. Ms. Brown will speak for about 45 minutes, which will lead into a question and answer session for the rest of this period. Ms. Brown asks that you line up on the side over here in order for you to be better seen and for her to hear you better. Thank you for being here once again, and please give a warm welcome to Ms. Magda Brown.
Thank you, Robin. Good evening. Good evening. Hold on. Am I not? Little technical difficulties. Can you hear me now? Yes? No? Give me the hand mic. Okay, now we are on. Well, hello and welcome to all of you. And as I was introduced, my name is Magda Brown. I was born and raised in Hungary. And I was a happy-go-lucky child, just like any of you when you were in the 7th or 8th grade. As a matter of fact, this is my 8th grade graduation picture. And the reason I show it to you are twofold. One is that I wasn't any different at that age than when you kids were 14 years old. But there is more deeper meaning to this photo than what you can see here. This is one of the very few reminder of my pre-war items or memories. And let me tell you before I even go into my story, how it came about. My parents, just like any parents, are happy to share their children's photographs of happy events. So my relatives, my mother and father sent this photo with a couple of other photos to the relatives in Chicago. And when I arrived, this was my first present. Now the other unique part about this picture is that on the back of it is my mother's handwriting, 1942, dated, and greeting the grandparents, the relatives sharing my picture. So it means much more than just looking at a photo. So, where do we begin? Like I said, I was a happy-go-lucky child. I did my homework. I didn't do my homework. I hung out with the kids. You know, all the fun things that a teenager does. So what happens when the pendulum swings and your happy days are severed seriously? All of you have already studied quite a bit about the Second World War. So I'm just going to give you a little overview to start the sequence of events. As you all know, Hitler came to power in 1933, and his fervent desire was to create a perfect race, to have slaves and lots of space. Unfortunately, he pretty nearly accomplished this. In addition to these plans of his, he had a fervent desire to eliminate the Jewish race and many non-Jewish people whom he considered the undesirables. So he started creating what they call the Nuremberg laws, the anti-Jewish laws. And these laws kept hitting the people one after another, and discrimination began. In addition, the Nazis had 2 units of soldiers in preparation for the forthcoming war. The one unit of soldiers were the regular soldiers like any other country where they prepare the military for saving the country or whatever purpose. But there was a special unit of Nazis, soldiers, where they were called the Einsatzgruppe. These soldiers were 100% trained to do nothing else but to move the Jewish people out of their home to the ghetto, to a concentration camp, and thus the killing machine began. Therefore, I call the Holocaust a premeditated, scientifically coordinated mass murder. So now, fast forward 1939, the Nazis are ready to start invading many Eastern European countries. So let's pick a country like Poland. Poland had a large population as well as a large Jewish population. So now, like I told you about this special unit of Nazis, they go into the home, they move the people out of their home into a ghetto, concentration camp, killing. All this is taking place in many of the Eastern European countries, but I live in Hungary. Hungary's situation is totally different, because in Hungary, we are still in our own home at this time frame, and we live a much better existence. We are having our homes, we are having our jobs up to a point. But then, in 1939, the Hungarian government adopts all the Nuremberg anti-Jewish laws. And a law is a law to be obeyed. So let me just cite about 3 anti-Jewish laws to give you an idea. There were many more. Well, the first one was set for the young couple who were of different faith and wanted to marry. Intermarriage was a big no-no, totally restricted. But then came much more serious laws. And let's pick on the military. Until 1939-1940, all young men, regardless of their religious background, would be called to serve in the military. Fine. Matter of fact, my dear father was a dedicated, proud Hungarian soldier of the First World War. He even wore his medals, and he was proud saving his country. 1940, the Hungarian government adopts many of the Nuremberg anti-Jewish laws, and one of them is that the Jewish young men of military age could no longer wear the country's uniform nor bear arms. However, he still had to enter the military compound. So in about 1942, my brother, who was 5 years older, was military age. So my parents had to outfit him with civilian clothing, just like when you kids go to overnight camp. And now my brother enters this military compound, but now they are not called soldiers of the Hungarian military. They are called the Jewish labor force. They are put into the military compound in a separate unit, and in a sense they are already in prison, where the regular soldier could go out on a leave, visit a girlfriend, move, some social activities. The Jewish boys had to have a very valid reason to leave the compound. In addition to that, they even had to wear a yellow armband on their arm, indicating further that they are Jewish. So then came another law. From one day to the next, the professors, journalists, scientists, pharmacists, more higher intellectual level, they received the pink slip. From one day to the next, they were out of a job. No other reason that God gave them the right to be born Jewish. That's it. So now you have to think a little bit further here. What if that professor had a wife and children and parents to support? There was no such law as a welfare system. So the Jewish groups had to pool their resources to support these thousands and thousands of unemployed people or need of help. And these laws kept coming and coming and coming. So finally, you see, it all is discrimination. Everything is done step by step by step. They reduce you to lower level than an animal. By the spring of 1944, Hitler decides that Hungary is not doing enough with his key slogan, the final solution. So on March 19, 1944, these two units of Nazis walk into Hungary. There's absolutely no resistance. They are welcomed by the Hungarian military, government, and police. In addition to them entering the country, the biggest tragedy here is that the special unit of Nazis to deal with the Jews is led by no other than Adolf Eichmann. Adolf Eichmann was an experienced mover of people. That's a very soft way of putting it, right? Anyhow, he had over 10 years or more years of experience moving people from their home to the different steps. So now he has another plus. The Hungarian police very eagerly assist him. So the small unit of Nazis who came into Hungary for this project were assisted by these Hungarian police, and therefore they are able to accomplish the greatest achievement in Eichmann's career, because in less than 51 days, they are able to execute this movement from their home to Auschwitz in 51 days, close to 500,000 people. Now think about it a little bit in more details here. Moving the people out of their home and going through all, this all requires methodical, perfect execution of movement. So now we are invaded, shall we say, by the Nazis. In less than a week's time, the order comes that we have to wear this yellow Star of David tightly sewn on our clothing. Without that, we were not permitted to go out on the street. And even tiny, tiny little children who had absolutely no idea what this all means, they had to have this yellow star sewn on their clothing. Without that, they could not go out. But this is nothing. Then comes the next order, again less than another week's time, that all the Jewish people will be moved out of the suburban or farm areas from the state into the capital city of the state. And the big city they designated to become a section of the big city would be the ghetto. So now comes another strange and painful situation, because visualize the mother at home alone with maybe 4 or 5 children, because the husband had been taken out of the house since 1940, because the Hungarian military took these Jewish labor force men and took them with them to fight Stalin at Stalingrad, and they used the Jewish boys as a testing of the minefields. So they would be blown up by the thousands. So we lost a lot of men as early as 1942. There was another tragedy in Hungary in 1942 when you had to prove that your great-grandfather was a Hungarian citizen. And Hungary had an issue here to deal with, because after the First World War, Hungary was divided. Part of it was given to Romania, to Czechoslovakia, to Yugoslavia. Those were, until the First World War, Hungarian citizens. Now they became Czech citizens. So everybody became multilingual. So now, if your grandfather was born in that section, then he was a foreigner. Or they emigrated maybe from Poland or Russia or wherever. So if you could not prove your Hungarian citizenship to your grandparents or further back, then came the surprise of the century. During the night, in the silence of the night, they would go into your home, take you out of your home, ship you out to Ukraine, and kill you. It was called the location Dominik Podolsk or something like that, Kamenets Podolsk. I can't remember the exact name of it. But anyhow, so we lost a lot of our Jewish men as early as at that time frame. So back to 1944 now, and here we are, the Sabal community. The police had an umbrella group called the Gendarme. These men were more brutal than anybody should ever experience. Because you see, I recognize the fact that a soldier has to obey his orders. But when they obey that order 200% more than what is expected of them, that is sheer brutality, and they practice it. So visualize this. You live in a small outlying community, the order comes. In 1 hour's time, pack a small overnight bag, maybe a 3-day provision. Take your family down the street and line up. Now here again I'm mentioning the mother who has the little children. So she hasn't got time to deal with everything in that limited time. So we'll tell that 5-year-old or 6-year-old kid, go to your room and put something in this bag. So obviously the child will put probably a toy in it or whatever nonsense, but chaos is beyond imaginable. So now these poor people are lined up on the streets, and this brutal gendarme pushes them, curses them, does all the bad things you could imagine. And by the way, there is no such a luxury as a train ride or car ride or bus ride. So if they were within walking area several miles, they would have to execute that by foot. Now let's say that the town, the area in the big city was allocated to become the ghetto. I happen to be living and born in that section of town. My grandfather built a house maybe 40 years prior to that. It was a very comfortable home for my parents, my brother and I, and an aunt and uncle who lived with us, 6 people. So now comes this gendarme with the group of people, looks into my house and makes an executive decision and shoves a bunch of people in. You see, humanity died. Courtesy doesn't exist anymore. What if my aunt or relative lived in the other area and would have liked to stay with us in my house? 0. He shoved a bunch of people into my house. So now, my home became the residency for 40 people. You cannot fathom what crowded conditions are. I mean, these people were already exhausted from the journey to get this far. And luckily, my parents knew about that our house will become part of the ghetto. So before the people arrived, they moved many of our heavier furniture into the yard, so there will be some floor space. So there were people in every corner of the house. And now I have to tell you that I had my own room. I was a spoiled brat. No, it's the truth. I had everything that a little girl should have, from clothing, shoes, stuff. This is where I learned how to share. Because there were girls who had nothing in their bag, 3-day provision, how long does it last? So if there was a closet full of stuff, it was no problem, whatever they wanted to have. Furthermore, the people who were in my house were a tad luckier than the others in the ghetto, because my father was in the meat market business, and in those days, they would smoke the raw meat because it did not require refrigeration. So we had quite a bit of smoked meat in the attic, so this supplemented our very meager ration that we were allotted in the ghetto. Once all the people were moved into the ghetto, they were no longer out. You couldn't go to a pharmacy, a doctor, 0. no more out. Matter of fact, the entryways were blocked off. There was police guarding the opening, and now we are incarcerated in our own home. So I'm going to cite only two things for you to make you understand life in the ghetto. And I call it the legal robbery and the illegal robbery. So let's touch upon the illegal robbery. We are in the ghetto for a limited time, and the Hungarian Nazi Party was comprised largely by the bunch of young, uneducated hoodlums. These young men could freely walk into the ghetto without the police stopping them. They would walk into a fully furnished home and, let's say, take down a painting from the wall or a silver platter, anything of value. I'm not talking about the material things because they rob us from everything anyhow. But I want you to understand that until this time, the police protected me as well as any other Hungarian citizen. Now they look the other way. Now let's touch upon the legal robbery. The legal robbery, we get an order from the government that in a couple of days or whatever, there will be some agents coming into the ghetto, and we have to turn over our cash, our jewelry, our radios, and other valuables. And you see, we were too scared to refuse because the punishment was enormous. So now we do all this, and here again, I'm not talking about the values of any of these things. The reason I tell you this, to make you understand that the cash they took from us pays the Hungarian railroad worker to ship us to Auschwitz. So life in the ghetto is not a bowl of cherry. It's a very serious, tragic time frame. Now soon we get acclimated is a very poor choice of words, but we are existing under these conditions. Get another order, and it goes like this. We're gonna have to leave the ghetto because they need workers in another country. And here came the lies of the 20th century. They said to us, you'll go to the other country, but the families will stay together. Now think about it. We have absolutely nothing left. Zero. You walk out with your little bag of whatever. But the families will stay together. What a fantastic psychological ploy. Because we don't resist. We go like the sheep to the gallows. So now the ghetto is evacuated. In my hometown of Miskolc, there were 14,500 people in that ghetto. So now we all had to line up and march clear across to the other part of town into a brickyard. And we couldn't understand why in heaven's name they bring us to a brickyard when there's absolutely nothing there but bricks. There's no toiletry, there's no furniture, there's no water, zero. Only bricks and the ground. But you see, I told you that the Holocaust was a premeditated, scientifically executed mass murder. Everything was worked out to precision. The reason they brought us into the brickyard, because it was adjacent to the railroad track. And on my 17th birthday, they lined us up and they shoved us into this boxcar. So, in the boxcar, if you ever go to the Skokie Holocaust Museum, they have an authentic boxcar on display. And if you look inside of it, it would be room for people sitting on the wooden floor, maybe for 35, 40 people, the most. They crowded in as many as 75 to 85 people with our little bag, it was standing room only. The only way I allowed my parents to sit on the floor, I stood for 3 solid days, shifting 1 inch this way, 1 inch that way. On the second day, somehow or another, I got shifted to the window where I'm pointing. It's a tiny little window, not bigger than your first little TV screen. And even that had a barbed wire across it. And I am standing by the window and looking out, and the train was just crossing the magnificent, lush mountains of the Carpathia mountain range. It's really, really beautiful scenery. And in the distance, I see a shepherd minding his flock. And I keep thinking to myself, how come he's there and I am here? You see, in my deranged mind at that point, I thought that the entire world was in boxcars. I couldn't imagine anything else. So now this train is going on a very slow pace because, don't forget, it's the height of the wartime, so the prominent railroad tracks are occupied by military trains, so they would push us to the back of the railroad yard for a stop. Some people would try to stick their arm out with a little cup so maybe they can put some water in or something, but people are too afraid to even come near us. All of you have studied psychology. So, every human behavior you studied, it was in that boxcar. There were the quiet ones, the cursing ones, the crying ones, the praying ones, and the sick ones. It was all there. It was a Tower of Babel. It was a chaos beyond comprehension. I remember one very sad moment. In the corner sat a young woman with a baby on her bosom, except that baby was already dead. Perhaps it was just as well, at least she died on her mother's breast. So now, the worst above everything else on this train ride was thirst. You cannot fathom what thirst is. For 3 days, we had only one time a bucket of water. I forgot to tell you that, and when we first boarded the boxcar, inside was a wash bucket like we have at home, filled with water, and the other bucket was for toiletry. But that first bucket of water was never, ever refilled. So thirst is so powerful that you forget your physical pain, you forget your stress. The only thing you can focus on, if I could only have a sip of water. Your whole mind is involved with that. So now, the third day, the train stops. We don't know where we are. We have no idea, we are supposed to go to another place to work. The doors open, and some strange-looking men stepping in, and they look so emaciated. They wear a striped uniform, and they speak another language. But it's remarkable how your sixth sense kicks in. And what they were trying to tell us, the little bit of baggage that we carried with, leave it in the train, you will get it later. Later never comes. Even that last stitch of memorabilia or clothing, whatever was in that bag, it's gone forever. Out. Now we step outside, and the direction comes that the men have to line up in one column, and that is the last time I see my dear father and any male members of my family. Now there are a sea of people. You see, to put one of these train loads on a lengthy trip like this would not be feasible. That's like 80 people. So depending on the size of the community, they would couple together as many as 55, 60 of these trains, what would be created or called a transport. Matter of fact, post-war, I found out to research that there were 147 transport trains coming out of Hungary to Auschwitz in the 51-day time frame. So now There are thousands of people lined up. These are women, old people, and children. So we have to line up and go forward. All of a sudden, we are faced by a group of Nazi soldiers or officers, whatever they were, and their hands go up like this, which you automatically understand it means to stop. And one officer steps forward, points a finger at you like this. You see, we are no human beings anymore. Nobody talks to us. It's just movements, like a robot. So now we move to this way, and my very young-looking mother, who was holding on to me, is separated to go that way. So I'll come back to tell you what happens when they went that way. So now comes a mechanized movement of actions. One, they take you into a room like this size, empty, totally empty room, disrobe completely, fold up your clothes, put it on the floor, you will get it later. Never saw even the last stitch of clothing that we came from home. From here into another room, which is the shock of shocks of a 17-year-old girl. Reason, all girls fix their hair, whether it was 72 years ago or whether it is today. It's part of life. There were some girls coming out from an adjacent room, and they were screaming from the top of their lungs, and they looked so strange. They were unrecognizable. Matter of fact, they looked like clowns or something. I cannot, but they looked terrible. Little did we realize that 5 minutes from now, we in this line will go through the same procedures. What has happened behind the next room? They shaved our head bald. All our body hair was shaven. And if that's not enough, they even sprayed disinfectant on the freshly shaven skin. So you can well imagine how that feels. So now we look so bad, or unrecognizable is a better word, that for the first couple of days or a period of time, we had to look into each other's eyes, listen to the voice in order to recognize one another. Next step. This is called the shower. It is only by name compared to the shower you took in your lovely home. This was nothing more than a big room with about 50 shower heads screwed into the ceiling, and a trickle of water, of dirty, smelly water, was reaching your body without any soap, without any towel, without any clean underwear. So here, next room, with a dripping body, wet body, we go into this next room, and this had mountains of clothing reaching the ceiling, that many odds and end clothing. A person behind it throws a garment at you. They don't ask, are you tall, skinny, fat, short, whatever, zero. I ended up with a full-length slip that they used to wear to the balls or whatever, pretty clothing, long dresses. No underwear, no stockings, no shoes. They took the shoes away from us, and we wore, the best I can compare is like a flip-flop, except it had thick wooden sole and a leather strap holding onto the top of your foot. It is the most difficult thing to walk in it. A matter of fact, that rubber step, that leather strap, rubbed my foot. To this day, I have a scar there. So now, it's bedtime. Again, a room of maybe something like this size that would hold probably 200 people lying on the wooden floor. There's no furniture in here. And they managed to put 500 of us lying on the floor for sleeping. Like the sardines in the can, laid down in layers. That's how we were laying in rows. Our flip-flop was our pillow, and the body heat next to you was your heat. In the corner, they had 2 buckets for toiletry, because for unknown reason, we were not permitted to go outside to use the latrines. And for your information, a latrine is nothing more than a giant hole dug in the ground and about 8 or 10, there's a wooden plank across it and 8 or 10 circles are carved out, and that's your toilet. But anyhow, we couldn't go out. We had to be in the room. Early morning, the crack of dawn, out. Now, what did your mother teach you? Brush your teeth, wash your face, put on clean clothes. Zero. As we were in that crumpled, dirty clothes, out. Now, although now we know already that we are in Auschwitz. And what they have done now, at this bedroom setting, they had an older survivor or older prisoner becoming our supervisor. When I say to you older, that doesn't mean age-wise, just have been at the camp longer. So her job was to line us up, the 500 of us, 5 abreast, and count us, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on, until she reached 500. If her number was off, she would start again. This insanity of counting could take an hour, could take 2 hours, whatever length. You had to stand erect like a soldier. You were thirsty, you were hungry, you were cold, you were tired, everything you can imagine, but you had to stand. To this day, I cannot figure out the rationale behind counting. Now think about it. I described how we looked, right? Every couple of feet, there was a Nazi woman guard with a police dog watching every move we were making. A couple of yards apart, there was a watchtower with a soldier aiming a machine gun at us. If that's not enough, the entire camp was surrounded by electrified barbed wire fence. Now you tell me, where in heaven's name we could have escaped to when we looked unrecognizable. But they kept doing it, sometimes 2-3 times a day. So as time progressed, many of our colleagues were getting ill. And heaven forbid to report that you're ill, because that was the end. So even if you were half dead or dead, you could not remain during the day in the sleeping quarters. That was a no-no. It was just for night to sleep there, and they locked the doors. So we improvised a system. We would have the 5 abreast standing in line, 2 people and 2 people. And the sick one we put in the middle, and we literally held her up to be counted. Then she could drop dead. So now we got this far, and I'll tell you about the gourmet food we got. Well, the first day, we were standing in line. By the way, there was no such a luxury as utensils. We had one little bowl. And we're standing in line, and there's some green liquid, some unidentified stuff is floating in it, and they ladle into my dish, and it smelled so bad, and it looked so horrible, that we kept gagging on it and we wouldn't touch it. First day. The old-timers gathered around us and they said, give it to me. And the first day we did. Little did we realize that this will be our diet forever, so we better eat it or else. So one more thing about what happened at this time frame. We are at the camp at Auschwitz now. We know it's Auschwitz. It's Auschwitz-Birkenau. Birkenau was built adjacent to Auschwitz because in the early 1940s, the crematoriums were built on the surrounding area, so they leveled off about 5 or 6 Polish villages, and that became Auschwitz-Birkenau. And this was to be the transitory camp for the arrivals to be killed in the crematorium. Whether you were healthy, sick, old, young, no discrimination. Therefore, we did not have any furniture in our sleeping quarters. Like you see some Holocaust photos where the prisoners are sitting on bunk beds. We had nothing because it was not necessary. So anyhow, we are there for a limited time, and we asked the old-timers, could you please tell us how soon we're going to see our relatives who came with us? They raised their hands and pointed to the 5 chimneys that was visible right there. That is where your parents are. We were in total denial. Come on, it's impossible. This is the 20th century. We come from a modern country. There is no such a thing as killing people alive. Unfortunately, we found out the reality of it. Now you see, when we first got there, we saw these chimneys spewing out heavy, dark black smoke, and there was a horrible burning smell. The best way I can describe it to you, let's say you kill a chicken and you have a flame, to hold up the body over a flame to remove the feather. And that's the kind of burning smell because from. But we had time to analyze, to even imagine what that represented. So it took a long time for us to realize the truth behind this. So one more thing about Auschwitz, and that is called the selection, a totally different meaning than what we use in our everyday life. Selection meant that a group would be called out from their sleeping quarters, had to circle an area out in the courtyard, and by the way, you had to remove your upper clothing halfway. I guarantee you they were not looking for our sexual beauty, but they wanted to know how strong our upper arm is. So now the selection came. There were a bunch of Nazi soldiers, officers, whatever they were, and they would select. They would select 2 columns of selectees. And one column was the healthier ones, the other one was the weaker looking ones. The weaker looking ones, that's their last hurrah, because that was the end for them. I was fortunate enough, with 1,000 Hungarian women, we were selected to be taken out of Auschwitz to an ammunition factory in Germany. And they were so expedient of processing us that I do not have a tattoo on my arm, but I will have a prison number that I'll tell you in a minute. So now we are processed through 1, 2, 3, and they put us on a train, and we end up in Germany, the general vicinity of Frankfurt, Kassel-Marburg area. And we are put into an old deserted army barrack. So our living quarters got to be a Hilton. It got to be a tremendous change because this has rooms for about 16 people. It has bunk beds, and you sleep on straw. There's no sheets or luxuries like that. So you sleep on the straw, and it had the most itchy blanket to cover with. The room had a table and chairs, and ironically, it even had a locker, but we had nothing to put in the locker. So now we are 1,000 women, and we are divided into 2 units, a night shift worker, day shift worker. So I have to alert you about that the average age is here from 16 to 25. Many of us were still in school. Some of them have never seen a factory, let alone work in a factory. But you'll be surprised when you are forced to do things, how proficient you become doing your job. So now we had to march from the sleeping quarters to the factory. That was about a good 3 to 4 mile walk in the early cold winter morning. We had only a thin spring coat, bare legs, and these flip-flops. It was cold. It was everything that you can imagine. It was bad. Now here I'm going to tell you something that I don't think you have ever heard, and that is about where we were. We walked through a forested area, and we walked into the building because the roof of the building was flat, it was sodded on the top, and trees were growing out of it. So when the Allied reconnaissance planes were searching the area, they saw nothing more than a beautiful valley. But we were right there underneath. So now we get into this ammunition factory, which manufactured bombs and rockets. I visualize a workbench, and there is a bomb which is about this wide, and you had to open up the neck of it, and there were pipes coming with liquid poisonous material. That pipe had to be inserted into the belly of the bomb, fill it, lock it, and then 2 people had to lift it because it was so heavy to take it to a warehouse location. It was extremely hard work. It was a 12-hour shift with very little food. And we are looking at each other about 4 or 5 months into it. By this time, our hair starts growing out into crew cut size. And if your hair was black, now it's orange. Your face is lemon yellow, and your lips are deep, dark purple. You see, we have been working with this highly poisonous material without any protective garments. So it started invading our body. So much so that they were concerned, which is a very loose statement. The factory director ordered for us to have a glass of milk. I can guarantee you it wasn't for our protein and other valuable improvements. It was just to keep us somewhat alive so we can keep on working. So this thing was going on. We knew very little about the outside world. We heard, the Allies were circling up our aeroplanes. We were hoping they would bomb us and kill us and get it over with. At the end of March, we received the order from the director of the camp that the camp will be evacuated, and we're going to go to the neighboring camp, which was Buchenwald. So it was the end of March, the coldest March in history. Everything you can imagine about cold, it was there. Rain, sleet, all the stuff. Now remember I told you we had only a thin spring coat, nothing on our legs. So they put us on an open highway, and we had to march for 3 days. Our colleagues were getting ill. We had to literally hold on to them and help them so they won't get shot. During the night, we slept on the wet ground in the ditches. On the 3rd day, we arrived in a farm area, in a village area, and we look around and we have noticed that there are less Nazi guards than when we started out at the camp. I guess they were trying to save their own lives. I mean, I have no concrete reason. So, we lived in faith and fantasy, and the fantasy overpowers everything else, because that kept us going. So now a group of us are standing in front of a barn, in front of a field, a wheat field or whatever it was, and in the distance we saw a barn about 3 city blocks in or something like that. Fantasy sets in. How would it be if during the night we crawl on our stomach and reach the barn and hide in there? You see, the important thing here is our self-esteem was 0. So what? They find us, they kill us, it will all be over. But thank God, it turned out fine, because on the 2nd day, we look out a little peephole, and 2 young men in an unrecognizable uniform are approaching us. It turned out to be two brave soldiers from the 6th Armored Division, God bless them all, because they risked their lives to save ours, and they were our liberators. So this is as far as life went at the moment. So now I am going to tell you 3 things that I want you to remember. I may have mentioned that genocide does not start suddenly. It builds gradually. All the things I tell you is the same as genocide. I told you how things are taken away from you step by step by step. Therefore, I want you to protect your freedom, because next to your health, the most important commodity you have is your freedom. Slavery is hell on earth. There's no other way of putting it. Second, I want you to think very, very seriously about hatred. I am not telling you to hate or not to hate. That is entirely up to your conscience. But at least give it some thought. Why do I hate? And thirdly, in this ultra-modern, high-tech society, every other day you will meet someone who denies the existence of the crematoriums or any phases of the Holocaust. So it is so sad, but I want to share with you General President Eisenhower's remarks when he and his soldiers liberated one of the worst concentration camps in Ohrdruf. And he made these remarks: I have never felt able to describe my emotional reaction when I first came face to face with indisputable evidence of Nazi brutality and ruthless disregard of every shred of decency. I visited every nook and cranny of the camp because I felt it my duty to be in a position from then on to testify at first hand about these things in case there ever grew up at home the belief or assumption that the stories of Nazi brutality were just propaganda. So use your thinking what he had to say. And also I would like to quote a very remarkable statement from Maya Angelou about freedom. And she said, freedom is a fragile thing and is never more than one generation away from extinction. They must be fought for and defended every day. So I think that I made my point. Now I have a request. I know you're tired, it's been a long day, but in order to answer everyone's question, the faster I have been finding through going through different schools is, if you be so kind and line up right here, then I can answer you right away. It expedites things and everybody can hear it, okay? So who is the first brave one? All right, when I do this to the 7th graders, I have to sweat out at least a minute before anybody moves. But you are sophisticated college students, so come on. Okay, I feel it until somebody, now you gotta come here. I don't talk to another way. This is lots of experience, children. Okay, come.
So my question is, what kept you going in those dark and horrible times? How did you keep hope inside?
Well, I told you earlier that I was raised in a religious home, so I had faith and belief. And you have no idea how much you want to live. You hope that tomorrow will be better. And this is what I sometimes say, because I've been hearing a lot of suicides among college-age students. And I think that this is the encouragement for them to understand that tomorrow will be better. Okay?
Thank you.
Do you remember any of the girls that you stayed in your room with or became friends with?
To this day, I Skype with them. I am a high-tech grandma. In order to understand you guys, I have to go with the flow. Okay, let me tell you something. I was with a group of girls, and I was the youngest, so they befriended me. And they were the ones who were with me at the barn. Some of them went back to Hungary, and one of them, matter of fact, she's 2 years older, but she's all over the world talking. So, good group. But nevertheless, I kept in touch with them throughout the years. Matter of fact, there is one survivor from my group who lives 10 minutes away from my house. She is a bright lady in America. She was a sales lady, so there is personality. She knows the language, not a word out of her. So sometimes I take her with me to one of my presentations, and she's like 4'9", and I introduce her. I said, this is Hilda, and fellow survivor. So she stands up, looks at the audience, points at me, and says the following: she is my mouthpiece. That's it. So I have to speak for many of these people to spread the story.
Why is that?
Why am I spreading it?
Why do you have to speak for them? Do they
She will not talk. Doesn't want to bring up any of the memories. Okay? So there are many of those. I'm not criticizing. It's not an easy thing to connect with your children day in, day out, but unfortunately, some of them absolutely do not want to just talk about it. And I respect that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you.
How did it feel when you got to Chicago and saw those pictures of yourself when you were younger?
Oh, that was, how did I feel that I got here? First of all, I have to tell you that I was luckier than many survivors because, you know, we hear about the immigration situation nowadays. I know what it is to be an immigrant. And the joy of reaching the land that's paved with gold. The streets are paved with gold. You heard that expression. And I was fortunate enough that I had some uncles in Chicago who actually paid for my passage and got me here. So, first of all, inheriting a new family, that was a joy. Second, when my aunt pulled out her album and started showing me this picture, and there's another picture of my parents and another of my brother, I mean, it's my greatest treasure. I do not have anything because after we were liberated, I heard that my brother might be alive. So through very, very painstaking efforts, I managed to get back to Hungary. There were no trains running, I had no money. I mean, a lot of difficulties. But I made it back to Hungary, and I found out that I went to the agency that was keeping a record of people who made it or didn't, and they said, well, I have good news for you, bad news for you. The good news is your brother is alive. The bad news is he's in Russian prison. And I couldn't believe that. I mean, this was already the fall of 1945. Japanese, all the war era was finished. So I found out what has happened to him. When the Russians were approaching to liberate Hungary in 1945, he and his Hungarian soldier unit combined were trying to get out of the country to save their hides. So what these Hungarian soldiers were doing, they would take the Jewish boys, dump them in concentration camps in Austria and Germany, and they go on with their lives. But by the time it came to this phase of my brother's unit, they could not cross the borders. It was just too protected. So he gets liberated by the Russians in Budapest, Christmas of January of 1945. So what happens? He feels like a free man, right? He goes out on the street, the Russian soldier arrests him. He claims, I said, look, I've been imprisoned by the military, and they completely turned away from that comment. They arrested the Hungarian soldier, the Jew, and the Nazi. Now the good guys and the perpetrators are shipped into Archangels in Siberia. And he ends up working with his perpetrators in a paper mill. And during the summer, his job was to go out into the swamps to cut down trees to make paper. He gets bit by a mosquito, develops malaria, which is a debilitating illness of temperature rising from extreme hot to extreme cold, minutes, seconds apart, without any medication, and he does not get released till 1948. By this time, I'm long in America, and all of a sudden I get a letter from him that he is back home as a very sick man. And you know, I keep repeating that there are good people all over. I wish there were more good people. Because my father employed a recently widowed young woman with a 3-year-old child in about 1938. She worked in the business. She helped us around the house. It was part of a family. She happened to be a Catholic lady, and when my brother returned, she took him into her home and literally nursed him back to health. So now there's another historical moment here. In 1948, United States is in a Cold War with the Russians, so there's no communication. I mean, even the letters were censored. Had to watch every syllable that I wrote, that there's nothing to be worried about. Anyhow, it has taken me till 1962 to get him here. So it was a treasure. We had him with us till 2010, and I always like to talk about him because he was a very special young man. But thanks for asking. So I think that I did pretty good and covered many areas. And I thank you so much for listening, and I hope you learned something.